Welcome to the fortnightly IAB webinar series. Welcome to the people who haven't joined us before, and welcome back to people who have been to our other sessions. Today we're talking all about retail, commerce, retail media, and everything in between. For those of you who are interested in any of our previous webinars, we've got them all recorded and presentation decks on the website. So feel free to go and revisit some of the ones that you may have missed over the last year and a quarter. I think we've been doing them now. During the session, the wonderful Tiffany, who works with us, will be sharing links to different bits and pieces. The recording of this webinar, as well as the presentation decks, will be available next week, so you can revisit this one as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gayla Roy, and I'm incredibly lucky enough to be the CEO of the IAB in Australia. And today I'm joined by a fabulous group of people who are raring and ready to go. So I'll go through the format for today. We have got a packed session, so I would ask people to pop Q&As in the Q&A box, any questions in the Q&A box. We will get to them, but we'll get to them at the end. So don't feel like we're ignoring you. We will get to them, but we're just got to get through the main content, and then we'll get to a panel and some chat. So today's session, you're going to hear a little bit of scene setting from me, but not too much. And then we're going to get into three really insightful presentations. First up will be Mark Mansour, who's the who runs client partnerships and sales at Cartology. I'm sure anyone who is in our industry has heard of Cartology. Have made a real big splash in the last year or so. A huge team that's growing sort of faster by the minute. So I'm really fascinated to hear Mark's update, both on a consumer trends point of view, but also how retail media is, I guess, evolving in the market. Following on from Mark, we're going to hear from Dean Vachisano, who is the country manager of Shopfully, a newer entrant into the market, though quite established in the European market. Lucky enough to have their headquarters in Milan. I'm not sure if you've been to the headquarters yet, but I'm sure we'll hear all about it. But a really interesting newish player in the market that's I guess it's a platform and an app type model that really helps marketers and consumers go right through from mobile exploration right through to in-store visits. So Dean will explain a little bit more on what they do, but more importantly, how consumers are interacting and shopping both online and in-store. And following Dean, we'll hear from the wonderful Lottie Laws, who's the sales director at Pinterest. Lottie will be talking again a little bit around trends and consumer behavior, a lot about curation, and a lot about the importance of the customer experience and how that can work from a platform point of view, from a retail point of view, and most importantly, from a consumer point of view. And then for our panel, we'll be joined by Roger Dunn from Group M, who's the General Manager of Commerce for Group M. But not only that, Rog, you have a group role, which I didn't quite realise. So Rog also heads up the sort of the e-commerce leadership for the whole WPP group in Australia and New Zealand. And impressively, the first person to be Amazon certified in Australia. So definitely a commerce expert here. So Rog will join us for, I guess, feeding off what the presentations are, some insights that he's seen from an agency point of view, and we'll get into that. So firstly, a few things from me. I don't think it's going to be any surprise that there will be a common theme through all the presentations, particularly on the e-commerce side of things in the market over the last year. So our friends at SimilarWeb, who actually floated on New York Stock Exchange last night, so congratulations to them on a successful launch, have pulled out some Australian data on some trends. So the first slide we're looking at here is looking at sort of larger shopping and retail sites, trends going through from the end of 19 right through to the end of April this year. And you can see that real, I guess, uplift during COVID time, but where we've landed at the beginning of the year, still very healthy increases compared to where we were pre-COVID in terms of people researching and shopping online. This is one on the fashion side of things. I thought this was quite interesting because I know there was a lot of discussion around people buying sort of new tracksuits and leisure wear for around the home, but that stark sort of increase in online fashion sort of research and shopping quite early on into the pandemic last year, and that a really healthy flow right through to our, I guess, our normal seasonal peak, but higher than normal, and again still staying higher into early 21. Overall, in terms of visits from Australians to different retail sites, if you're looking year on year for the first quarter of the calendar year, up nearly 50% across those 7 categories that are on the screen. Obviously quite different per category. Areas like furniture stores, which had, I guess, less evolution in the terms of their online offerings, whether that be catalogues or information or going right through to e-commerce, huge growth, but growth across all of those areas. Not only did we see traffic increases, we actually saw conversion increases. So once people had a session at a particular retailer or manufacturer, that actually having a healthy increase in terms of people converting to a sale during that session. But wait, there's more. Not only were people shopping more and looking more online, that was converting through to people starting to go back into stores. So this is some footfall data, some data from the retail side of things from our friends at Bliss, and a big call out to Harry Lamb for pulling this out for us, and we'll share a link to some more information that Bliss have pulled out, looking particularly at these 3 markets. So the comparison of New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria in terms of footfall in store, and seeing that, you know, that healthy increase of people actually going back into retail environments. The obvious different trends there in terms of Victoria being sort of a bit more suppressed with their longer lockdown, but everyone coming back, and particularly, I guess, what we're seeing in terms of consumer confidence overall, with the news of the vaccine, with the economy still being particularly robust, and probably more robust than people were expecting post JobKeeper and JobSeeker money going away, and that confidence sort of translating into those retail visits as well. So that's all you're going to hear from me for the moment. I'm going to hand over to Mark Mansour, who's going to take you through his presentation. Take it away, Mark.
Thanks for the intro, Gay. I'm Mark. I'm the Director of Client Partnerships and Sales at Cartology. I thought it would be a great opportunity to take you through a little bit about retail media and the role that retail media plays in that customer journey. So as we all know, it's growing and garnishing more attention, and it shouldn't be any surprise as customers' behaviour, the way they shop, the way they engage has really changed over the last 12 months. What does that mean for brands? Brands that sell through retail platforms want to be able to influence customers, not just at that point of purchase, but through their entire journey. And at Cartology, our role is to really enable brands to build better connections with customers, whether they're in-store and online at the moments that matter the most. So a little bit about the retail media proposition. So when we look at it here, the retail media proposition starts with customers. And so our role is to ensure that customers, that the experiences that we create are accretive for customers and that they're contextual and a seamless extension of their shopping experience. So the second part of the retail media proposition is activation, and that is activating campaigns that are hyper-relevant to those customers, and that's whether they're in our network or off our network. And lastly, the most important part is being able to measure the effectiveness of these campaigns, closing the loop. And that is, are we driving sales overnight and customers over time? Retail media platforms are really uniquely positioned to be able to do that. So there have been significant challenges for brands, and the following research was conducted by our partners at Quantium, It's called the 1,000 Brand Study, and what Quantium did was they looked at the top 1,000 brands within Woolworths supermarkets over a 5-year period. What we found was the top 1,000 brands lost more than half their customers every year. So that's problematic because on average, those brands only have 6% penetration, which means that brands have to go out and find customers that they lost from a very big cohort. And that's a challenge for any marketer. Customers have proliferation of choice, and this is reflected in how they switch between brands. The study also showed that loyal customers generate almost double the value than newly acquired customers. So rather than just adding new customers, we feel that there's a job to be done to retain loyal customers. But what does this all mean in the context of the changing landscape? Well, the shopping journey is no longer linear. For many customers, shopping is now a hybrid omni-channel experience based on their personal preferences. For some, it means shopping in store only, but for an increasing cohort of customers, it actually means researching and planning their shopping experience before they go into stores, and others, it's doing everything online. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. So we know that customers' behaviours evolved, and there are multiple touch points along that path to purchase. Our aim is to always enrich that journey, helping customers to navigate our ecosystem. So what we have here is a typical customer journey, and I thought I'd take you through that. So the journey starts online. Often it starts online to either plan, to be inspired, or to ultimately convert. Significant traffic comes to the woolworths.com.au platforms, around 12 million visits per week. Interestingly, 96% of shoppers are browsing our digital aisles looking for inspiration. The customers then will often go into store within a 2 to 3 day time frame. And when they're in the store, there's significant opportunities for brands at that stage because 80% of their basket is still unplanned. So there are still opportunities to influence what those customers are choosing at the shelf. Interestingly, we see 68% of our customers who start their shopping journey online within 4 days are going into our stores and converting. The key here is understanding that the impact that digital has and the investment that brands make in their digital presence not only drives conversion online, but it also drives a significant amount of transactions in store. So in the shopping journey, the ability to be able to link, influence, and measure digital and in-store shopping journey is key for brands. And how partners are doing this is really anchored at the start of that shopping journey and by creating unique digital brand experiences. So the best practice examples of these experiences are anchored in a specific brand destination. Most brands are looking to better engage customers given the recent shift to online and the influence that online has on the overall shopping journey. When we look at how customers engage with our digital platforms, we really see two primary missions: utility and discovery. So utility is about how we deliver a seamless e-com experience. It's about focusing on making it easy to search, and ultimately, in a utility mindset, a customer is looking to transact. The other use case is discovery, and discovery is all about complementing that customer journey through inspiration, education, engaging content that's unique to the brand. So with our content and commerce solutions, we've developed digital destinations that can facilitate both these missions, and where a brand has the opportunity to express their own value proposition through their offers, content, all within a brand safe, illuminated Woolworths digital ecosystem. So I shared a little bit around the benefit of having a strong digital presence. Other ways that brands can drive more impact is by combining their traditional brand building activity like TV with activation channels like retail media. So Burnett and Field conducted research on the synergy of brand activation in delivering effective campaigns. And what they observed was the combination of brand plus activation channels delivered twice as much effectiveness versus comparable investment. So for us at Cartology, we're really thinking about that, and that is, how do we build for current TV trends where more viewing and TV advertising is addressable? This creates opportunities for better targeting to reduce wastage and closed loop measurement that wasn't possible before. We're building it to deliver through the line campaigns. Connected TV and digital is key, but also display, social, Woolworths' owned media play a part as well. So from my experience, brands are really excited about this integration and the effectiveness that comes with it. So I just wanted to close with, while retail media has existed for years, the opportunity for brands to continue evolving how they build better connections with customers is still immense. And there are significant opportunities for brands to continue growing and building better experiences for customers in the future. I think I'll be passing over to Dean now.
Thanks, Mark. I guess I just want to start by saying, like Gay kind of mentioned, we are new to this market. We've only been around for 3.5 years. So really starting to build a presence here now with 3.5 million consumers on our application browsing content on a regular basis. My presentation really does focus on consumer trends and changes, as well as what retailers and brands need to do to really survive in the future when it comes to catalog and digitization of that catalog content. I guess, like Gay said, things are starting to normalize in the industry. Absolutely, from a footfall perspective, we're seeing the trends on the upwards, but there are a lot of consumer habits that have changed and will continue to change over the next few years as, I guess, we start to normalize as consumers post the COVID pandemic. What we did see over the last 12 months is a huge adoption across all generations of digital assets or digital channels. In the past, it was very much the younger generations that adopted relatively quickly, but we're now starting to see the older generations also start to adopt that digital research. Very similar to, like Mark mentioned, really doing a lot of at-home research at their desk at work before they're actually going into store to purchase. And that rings true with a 9% increase in overall screen time that an average consumer spends on the internet each day. And now over 93% of purchases are influenced by some sort of digital channel. Interestingly enough, though, even though consumption is changing and digital is influencing decision-making, in-store still remains, I guess, the top way for consumers to purchase goods. And this is from a 2021 survey from Australia Post around the trends of e-commerce. Absolutely, online purchases are growing across most categories, in double digits and sometimes triple digits. But we can't ignore that in-store journey is what consumers still love. And those trends that Gay shared are absolutely, confirming that Australians do want to get back out there. They do like to touch, feel, smell, get a sense of what they're actually buying. So I think, this trend is certainly going to continue on the online journey, but, there's still a huge portion of consumers that like to purchase in store. The other interesting thing that has changed is, post-COVID, according to quite a few different studies, so our own study that we did with our own consumer base, a study from McKinsey, as well as a study from Google, we see that brand loyalty is changing. Back a few years ago, most consumers were loyal to a particular brand or a particular retailer. But given the constraints of COVID has put on our household expenditure, we're starting to see that brands' loyalty change. So no longer will, somebody just look at convenience or anything like that. They're starting to look at price. They're starting to consider the second brand that they wouldn't consider before. They're starting to look at, traveling a little bit further to get a better discount. So all these things are starting to play into consumers' minds. So, brands and retailers really need to be aware that it's no longer one consumer loyal to a brand, and you really need to, like Mark said, continue on that journey right through all the touch points. It's not just about a singular touch point anymore. It's about, making sure you're becoming aware to a consumer across all the touch points that they're now, I guess, going through to make their purchasing decision. And 83% of these respondents also said this behavior is here to stay. So even though the pandemic is nearing an end, consumers have made the choice that, this way of researching and finding things either cheaper, better, closer, or even further from them for, to save household money is here to stay. So it's going to become harder than ever for retailers and brands to really remain relevant and front of mind for consumers. So what that means is, and what we're seeing, around the world in all the markets that we operate in, is the smartphone is really becoming the remote control for shopping. So consumers are absolutely turning to their smartphones to understand where, how, why, peer-to-peer contact, research of their own, and it's really becoming this channel to browse content for pre-purchase. So it's becoming more important than ever, the smartphone. I guess one of the things that hasn't changed though is catalog consumption. Consumers here in Australia love a catalog. Woolies can attest to this, so can Coles and most major retailers. The catalog has been around for 33 years and it's really hard to change consumer behavior. I think we were forced to change behavior last year and some of those behaviors will absolutely stick around. But one thing that rings true from all the research that we've seen is catalog isn't going anywhere. Consumers still love the catalog. They like to see offers, browse offers, feel special about the different things that land either in their inbox, their letterbox, or even, browsing through digital content. What is changing though is the way that consumers are consuming that piece of media. So a recent survey that we did with Nielsen showed that 43% of consumers have shifted from physical to digital. So we've seen a huge increase in the way that consumers are consuming that piece of media, and a 38% decrease in the physical catalog itself. And I think this is a challenge for retailers because retailers now need to find a way to balance that online and offline distribution of their catalog. And that's what Shopfully is really about, helping retailers on that journey of digitizing this content and remaining relevant across those two different channels, so online and offline. And this rings true in our own data as well. So we're seeing a huge increase in app engagement. Compared to 2020, we've got a 35% increase in engagement, which means that consumers are reading more content. So they're not just going on to read one piece of catalog content, they're reading 3, 4, 5, sometimes up to 8 different retailers' content. And that kind of goes back to the points I made around no longer loyal to a brand. And we can see that in this data. And they're spending longer on the app itself. So 88% increase in session time, as well as amount of sessions in a given month. So consumers are coming back more regularly to see if there's anything new, retailers that they might have missed, or anything that's a little bit further away from them that can actually help them save time or money or whatever it might be. Excuse the Italian catalog here. I didn't get time to change that into an Australian version, but essentially, what we're trying to do here locally is turn what is, a $700 million plus industry into a real automated marketing platform. So hyperlocal automation, all about saving time and money for retailers, but also making it more efficient for the consumers as well to browse that content in real time. So how do we shift at the same pace that consumers are shifting and remain relevant? It really does come down to audience and data. They're the two things that are really going to drive, the new evolution of the catalog into the future. And here at Shopfully, we do have access to millions of consumers. So yes, we are a marketplace that holds 3.5 million consumers here locally, but we've evolved to tap into different publishers and different ecosystems to help retailers push that content out in a single location, providing incremental reach across all of those networks. So we really do start with the physical catalog in its traditional sense, use all of the data that we get from the retailers from a store and product perspective. We have all of the audience data from our marketplace, so it's first-party data on browsing, store visitation, retailer interest, et cetera, and we push that out across a huge ecosystem of networks to create this digital amplification strategy. And this is really where consumers are playing now. They're no longer playing in that physical space. Absolutely, there is still a need for the physical catalog, but more and more consumers are switching to the likes of Shopfully as a marketplace, even Instagram or Facebook, to find these types of content. And 9 times out of 10, it is leading back to a retailer ecosystem because that's where a consumer feels connected or a trust kind of connection with that brand. So it is pointing back to that retailer. So really what consumers want is local shopping made easy. And to do that, it takes a lot of work for a retailer to kind of build out a digital ecosystem that can push out a lot of content hyper-locally in real time. And be relevant to consumers. Right now that consumers are more digital savvy and aware of all the platforms that they can use, they do expect some level of personalization, and that's really hard to build for retailers that don't have huge loyalty databases, for example, or haven't played in the online space for a very long time. So Shopfully is really about, making retailers aware of that situation and using our own first-party data to make that shopping experience easy for consumers. So if I had to sum everything up, I mean, we are seeing changes in digital consumption. We are seeing, shifts in brand loyalty. We're absolutely still seeing a huge appetite for in-store visitation, and consumers definitely want to touch and feel. But what we need to be aware of is we need to create interest across all touch points. It's no longer about one catalog to a single household. It's about one catalog to the right consumer at the right time across whichever platform they're browsing on, be it at home or online. It's about making that choice easy for them. So helping them with that decision, being in front of them and top of mind is really important now more than ever, because, like I said, consumers aren't loyal to a brand anymore. So, regardless of whether you're a big brand that holds a big brand presence, if there is a smaller brand that has a similar product to you that's of better value to that consumer, they're more likely now to change than ever. So you really do need to be present, whether you're big or small, in a marketplace or across the digital ecosystem, and all about making everything discoverable, right? So, in-store is absolutely of importance, but so is online. So we're all about making that store or that product discoverable, so transparent. We're aware that e-commerce is extremely transparent. The store network isn't so transparent, and that's a challenge for retailers both here and in the other markets that we operate in. So we really are trying to make the entire consumer journey, transparent and easy for the consumer. I'll hand over to Lottie now that will, start talking about the trends that she's seeing on her end.
Thank you. Let me just present my screen. Okay, hopefully you can all see my screen. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm Lottie. I lead partnerships here at Pinterest, and in particular, I work with a lot of retailers and e-commerce brands. And I'm here to talk about how we can inspire a new retail journey. So we've heard from the previous couple of presentations that over the past year, consumers are increasingly turning to online shopping. So the question is, how can retailers take the best of what they may be doing offline and push it online? So we're going to discuss how we can do some of that and how we can affect the purchase journey that our customers are going along today. So the first thing is, the past year has been quite crazy since the start of COVID. The trend of online shopping has really been expedited across all generations, as you've just seen, not just the youth. And really shopping habits have changed and now become muscle memory. So almost a third of people who are shopping online in Australia predict that they're going to continue to shop more online than they did previous to COVID. So even once COVID is over, they do intend to kind of keep up these habits. And in Australia, 9 million households are shopping online and have shopped online in 2020. And 1.3 million of those were completely new to online shopping, so they had not been doing this before. Over 16% of all retail in Australia is now happening online, which is huge. When we think about in terms of dollar expenditure, that's 57% year-over-year growth. And as I mentioned, the themes and the trends around online shopping have really been expedited. So previously it was forecasted that in 2023, we would be seeing this level of online retail happening as a total share of Aussie retail. But it's important to remember it's not just where consumers are shopping that is different now, it is how they are shopping and the different behaviors that do go into a lot of the decision making that they're doing. So 45% of Aussies who shop online are looking for new ways to save money. 27% of Aussies are spending more time researching their purchases since COVID has happened. And as you probably would imagine, digital channels are a huge trigger for that. And the queues for finding a new place to shop online are largely coming from online channels. So 60% of those queues. So that's made up of social sites, online ads, and also just proactive online researching. So think the message here is that retailers really need to show up in a useful and relevant way to be a part of that decision making and that research process. And whilst it's really clear and obvious that e-commerce is growing in this market, it is also really clear that customers do miss the in-store shopping experience. They miss some of the things that we've already heard about, the really tactile experiences. And the word shopping in this is very important because it's different than just buying. And the difference between shopping and buying is the inspiration and all those experiences that kind of happen in the middle. And that's made up of browsing, touching, having the option to compare product, personalization, and research from Luna in March of this year shows that Aussie online shoppers really miss browsing the most, 67%. 57% really miss trying things on, half miss that face-to-face in-store customer service experience that they can get, and almost half are missing kind of touching and testing product. So you can see why it's important to kind of differentiate shopping and a lot of those experiences that are associated with offline versus buying, which is very transactional experience. So the key is it's really important that as retailers and sometimes marketers, we're bringing the best pieces of that offline experience to shopping online, and we're able to mimic some of these things like browsing in the aisles and trying things on. So when we think about everything that we've just heard, I really think there's three things that as retailers we need to nail in order to connect with consumers and ultimately be the retailer that they choose. The first is reaching customers early. On Pinterest, we know that people come to Pinterest to think about product and planning, but only 3% go thinking about a brand. The vast majority, 97%, are just thinking about generic products and services. So there really is this chance to be there early and kind of sway decisions there. The second is the opportunity to inspire by being useful and giving a personal, positive experience. This phase is really about making the consumer pick you and setting yourself and your brand aside. And then the first piece is a seamless purchase experience. So it's almost kind of futile showing up in all the right places and saying the right things if then there's a bunch of friction between, you know, someone being inspired and feeling great about your product and then actually being able to get their hands on it and buy. So the first piece is reaching the customers early. So we know that consumers are going online and they're doing their research early. They're going somewhere to explore, compare and have choice. And they're weighing things up and they're in their consideration phase. And on Pinterest, we see that when our platform is a part of influencing a Christmas gifting sale, that sort of moment of influence is probably 60% likely to have already happened by mid-November. So, you know, again, we've seen from some of the previous presentations, but that kind of consideration, research, inspiration phase can be quite long. So it's important to get in there at the right time and be present. The second thing is inspiring the users with a really useful and ideally positive experience. So some research again from Luna has shown that when we can be useful as retailers and brands, online shoppers are a lot more likely to buy if they've had an experience that, you know, is traditionally something that lives in store. For example, they can try something on virtually. So in this case, 73% of online shoppers are more likely to buy something if they've had the ability to try it on. So again, we're thinking about how we can mimic those traditional store experiences and bring it into that, that sort of virtual e-commerce experience. And at the start of this year, we saw some beauty brands trying this out and doing just that on Pinterest. They virtually did a try-on experience, and this is an example of Urban Decay. I think YSL and Lancome also tried, but they gave the pinners the opportunity to try on things like eyeshadow, try the different shades, And what we found was that when a pinner engaged with this kind of experience through AR, they tried something on, they were 5 times more likely to buy that product versus if someone had just gone ahead to a normal pin, seen a product and bought it. So the opportunity to be useful and bring those offline traditional bricks and mortar experiences online really converts. And then the last thing is the seamless purchasing experience. So even just probably a few years ago, it was pretty normal for, you know, this extended network and these online places that our consumers live, like social media sites. It was normal for them to be where the place where they go to get inspired, but also, you know, brands would be using these platforms to build community. Now Australians are spending over 2 hours apparently a day on social media sites. And previously they were going there for that, and then often going off to a retailer, making their way to an eBay or an Amazon, or directly to, you know, whatever had inspired them, like a Woolies or a Coles. Whereas now we have the opportunity to shorten that experience. So you can be a brand on the platform. If you have a catalog feed or a product feed, the chances are on any social platform, you actually now can make it a shoppable experience. So if you have a feed, you can partner with a third-party e-commerce tech platform. Pinterest example is we've partnered with Shopify, which provides an e-commerce platform to millions of merchants around the world. You can even plan and create your pins from Shopify. And it's just a way of seamlessly pushing your product catalog onto a site, onto Pinterest, and having it be shoppable direct from the platform. So really, this new way of shopping is a way to shorten that purchase path, that purchase cycle that we know from all the previous things that we've talked about can be very long. And as marketers, we really have an opportunity to collapse the marketing funnel. So we have an opportunity to help our consumers hop straight from being inspired to buying, basically. So there's a real opportunity for brands to win here and to basically kind of, I guess, intercept at that point of inspiration. So I think that's where we have a potential to win. And so in summary, skip past. In summary, consumers are rebuilding how they shop, how they behave. Their shopping habits have changed permanently now. And our shopping behaviors in Australia have been expedited by a few years. And again, brands, the expectation is that we can keep up with that. But the desire for in-store experiences and that very tactile way of shopping and not just transacting is still there, and it's still what our customers want. So what we have to do as brands is really make a shift and bring all of that offline, you know, brand value and the experience piece, and make it interchangeable across channels so that we can compete. So that is me. Thank you. I think I'm passing straight off to Gay now for the panel.
Fabulous. Stay on, Lottie. We need you in the panel. If all the other panelists want to come back. Lottie, do you want to just stop screen sharing? Perfect. I was wondering if I was watching that blue eyeshadow, Lottie, and wondering if I was brave enough for it. It's such a great example of, you know, bringing a product to life.
Yes, I think you could, Gay.
I'll give it a go. Thanks everyone for joining us. Roger, we might start with you. You've heard a lot from the crowd here. Interested in if they match what you're seeing in terms of trends, how you're dealing with clients and sort of bringing them along on the journey. What's hot with you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, fascinating presentations today. And I think it really captured what we've seen. I mean, the macro trend for last year in 2020 was really growth of e-commerce. You know, there's no questions there. Depending on kind of which measure you look at, like ABS is a good source now, but online index is another one. It's between 50 and 60% up. And I think the interesting thing is it's not necessarily at the expense of overall retail, because there has been growth in the total retail. It's just that share has shifted to at least 10% online, and obviously much higher for non-food categories and a little bit lower for food categories, just by the nature of the kind of maturity of those. And I think also we heard from Mark earlier, retail media is definitely a huge trend for us. So retailers are obviously looking to monetize their really valuable audiences close to the point of purchase. And for brands, obviously when budgets are quite tight, you want, you know, ROI, you want to be able to track that through to a sale. And I think retail media is a perfect opportunity there. And from an agency perspective as well, we're getting this plugged into some of the tools that we're used to using, like CanShoe or PackView, so we can really optimize that and make sure it's performing to its best. And I think hand in hand with that, retail events as well are a really big thing throughout the year. So whether that's local, like Friends, which is up, you know, hugely on a number of their events. We obviously had a late Prime Day last year, which was Amazon's biggest ever day in Australia, which was then surpassed by Black Friday just a few weeks later, or a few days later even. So huge events, and I think the rumours are for this year is it's going to be a little earlier. It's usually in early July, but we're hearing it's going to be in June this year. So that's another one to watch out for in sort of less than a month or so. Another one is the trend towards shoppable content as well. So we've got, you know, many different publishers and partners coming up and creating these shoppable ad units. We've got shoppable, yeah, different formats there, and the thing is, they can drive online and drive an online purchase, but they equally drive into store as well. So they're really those units that can help direct customers to wherever your sort of outlet is. And I guess what we're seeing as a macro trend in that space is that really the roles being redefined. You think about it, like the store was always the place where you purchase things. Now it's becoming much more experiential in a lot of categories, where you go and try things on and you know, have a brand experience, whereas you might actually then just end up buying it online. And we're bringing these shop fronts everywhere online. So that's another one that's being driven by, I guess, a technology trend in terms of headless commerce. So this is the concept where your back end of your online store is very separate and distinct from the front end that the consumer uses. They're joined by APIs, but what that means is that you can then use those APIs to push out products into all sorts of places. And we've heard from Lottie around Pinterest, and social commerce is a huge area where your products can now be fed out and pushed in online, and those storefronts are popping up, you know, literally everywhere. So again, a really interesting opportunity for brands to shorten that purchase funnel, you know, move from discovery to purchase really quickly. And then I guess the final one was just around the real trend around direct to consumer. So there's a real opportunity to sell directly. Even Amazon was struggling in the US with some of their fulfillment. So it's a workaround there for some brands. We've seen, you know, FMCG brands like Heinz to Home setting up, PepsiCo launched snacks.com in the US as well. And I guess it solves a couple of problems. So not only does it generate some sales, and you wouldn't expect it to be a huge volume driver, but it's that relationship with the customer as well. So growing a first-party audience or first-party data is obviously a crucial one with all the changes in the landscape currently around cookies. And it's often an opportunity to offer something different, an experience, whether it's a curated experience, a personalized one, some exclusives or early access for customers, or it's just plain value and customers can maybe sign up for a subscription for a discount. So I guess all of these things are really the kind of benefits for consumers and also for brands to have a more direct relationship. So yeah, they're probably some of the main trends we're definitely talking about and solving, you know, some of those challenges for clients at the moment.
Thanks. It sounds like a lot of work is the wrong way to word it, but like retail marketers in terms of their skill set and the amount of channels and the amount of assets they're going to need is really changing. So it'll be an interesting time to see how that's, you know, managed across all those different touch points in the same look and feel and that same experience.
Definitely, and there are some ways to automate that as well. So feed management is a growing space where you have your product feed, you know, managed, optimized, and really clean, but, you know, unique for each channel that it's going to be pushed out into as well. So I guess that's where you need to balance both the involvement from people, but also the technology that you use to make that happen.
Cool. Awesome. Lottie, I might pick up with you on that sort of direct to consumer angle, and I guess broadening that out to how you're seeing the legacy brands versus some of the sort of direct to consumer or smaller brands I guess what they can learn from each other, because there seems to be a bit of a crossover of DTC brands doing a bit more traditional stuff and traditional brands doing a bit more innovative stuff.
Yeah, and I think it just kind of makes sense that the more kind of legacy brands who have been playing in kind of bricks and mortar for a long time, they have such a solid understanding of consumer experience, and these, I guess, those things that we talked about make up a shopping experience. So the very tactile bits and what's important and what drives decision making. And they tend to be very fast and are kind of great at coming to conclusions around what is really important there, and they kind of understand the value of what they need to bring online. I guess what some of those D2C brands and kind of pure play e-com brands are great at is almost kind of the best practices. So they understand just intrinsically how to show up. They know just through the nature of being online only how to be discoverable. They often can provide very frictionless shopping experiences online and go do that kind of straight from inspiration to shopping piece. So I think where a brand can kind of nail both, they are going to kind of be doing a great job, basically. Brands like Big W, for example, who have the kind of bricks and mortar experience, but then they are tailoring their marketing messages. For example, on Pinterest, they tap into trends, they know what people are looking for, and they kind of make sure that they're showing up in the right places in the right way. So I think a combo of the two things, a meeting in the middle is what's going to lead to success.
Yeah, great. Dean, I might sort of follow on from that sort of big versus small type idea with you as well, because a lot of the stuff that you're dealing with is quite tactical. You know, we know sort of promotion stuff works really well. How are you seeing sort of big versus small brands, or how can smaller unknown brands sort of cut through in that space?
I think, you know, a few years ago, it'd been near impossible for a small brand to get any sort of recognition like a big brand. I mean, big brands have huge store presences. They have a huge, you know, marketing team. They have a lot of money behind them. But I think the benefit today is consumers' behaviors are changing, and they're more open to that second or third brand that wasn't on their list a few years ago. So I think now more than ever, those smaller brands and smaller retailers have an opportunity to really steal some market share from the big players. But to do that, they need to be smart about where they place their content, right? And, you know, one of the places that is probably the best is a marketplace, not necessarily a Shopfully marketplace, but a marketplace that places them in front of a consumer who's in that decision-making frame of mind, and places them directly next to those bigger brands. And I think you'll find today, given that trend of consumer behavior has changed, they'll be now more considered as a potential purchase opportunity for these consumers. So I think for the smaller brands, it's just about, you know, being as many places as they can with the budget that they have, and not forgetting that, you know, consumers' behaviors have changed. So playing against the biggest players is probably going to pay off just as much as it has before.
Thanks. Mark, we've talked a lot about the trends, a lot about what marketers need to do. Are they doing it? How are you finding, I guess, the local brands sort of on their journey? How are they adapting to the change?
Look, I think they're really sophisticated, and they have a heavy emphasis on, one, understanding the customer journey, two, really great capability in terms of their insights, you know, data science teams, to help map out these journeys, and three, they have a really strong appetite to partner. From my perspective at Cartology, we have really great relationships with our clients. They're our partners, and what we're seeing is that the best brands are really focusing on the entire shopping journey, whereas in the past they might focus on singular channels. Now they look at the omni-channel experience, and what we see is not a one-size-fits-all. There are so many dimensions and variables that change the outcomes that you can deliver based on the category or the product. And so it's really about coming together, developing a strategy in partnership, and really executing against that strategy. You know, the best campaigns for brands that I see in my experience are the ones that are really integrated, where they're being really thoughtful about the beginning of the shopping journey all the way to when a consumer's at shelf, and they're ready to be influenced, inspired, but also, you know, maybe try something different as well.
On that, I guess the brand loyalty side of things, which we've talked a lot about, you know, whether it's price, trialing new brands, are there different drivers now for that loyal repeat purchase?
Look, I still think price is a fairly significant driver, but when we look beyond price, and we look at the last 12 months, we saw that buying behaviour and switching between brands was a little bit more prolific, and it was really about you know, consumers were going and favouring more well-established brands, and that's normalised, and so consumers are returning back to a broader repertoire of brands across lots of different categories. But from my view, the key driver for loyalty is still mental and physical availability.
Did anyone else want to jump in on that one in terms of brand loyalty? Roger, are you sort of working on any different strategies there?
I think back at what Mark says, like the year that was for 2020 was definitely an opportunity to win some new customers because people's behaviours disrupted. So it was a real opportunity to get in front of brands, and they were using retail media in many different platforms to sort of insert themselves in that journey as people were shopping. So I think that shake up, you know, we've got more people shopping online. We've got certain demographics, which you would expect not to, like the older demographics that hadn't shopped online before coming into market. And I think that really created opportunity for brands to get in front of new customers. So we definitely saw that. And yeah, I guess it's not going back as well. I guess that's another message which we've heard today, is that behavior hasn't shifted back. And I think when we touch on that D2C change as well, people at home have, you know, a little bit more time to actually shop on brands' own websites as well. So they're doing their research and they're having a bit of a stronger relationship. And when it's a new brand, I guess you do go to their website to discover a bit more and find out a bit about their background and what the brand stands for as well.
I think also, Gay, just adding to that, the pandemic was a huge driver of that, I guess, brand loyalty shifts. And if you think about, you know, just the sheer panic that happens and the lack of supply at most supermarkets, department stores, et cetera, et cetera. So consumers couldn't actually get the brand that they were loyal to. So it was a forced change as well. So price absolutely remains the number one, you know, impact on consumer brands loyalty. But that forced change, absolutely, like Roger said, has, you know, made consumers more aware of other brands, and that loyalty is absolutely shifting because they were forced to trial new brands and aren't going back because they've realized that that brand that they've trialed is, you know, a brand that they like. So I think that's also forced this, you know, not going back to, you know, brand loyalty as well.
Interesting. Question I've sort of prepared you guys for, but not overly. So let's see how we go with this one. And I guess we wouldn't be an Australian webinar without comparing ourselves to the rest of the world. And we know e-commerce, we have been behind the game for, you know, I've been trying to do e-commerce sort of reports since about 1997 when it's just kicking off in the market. Again, I might start with Roger with this, and then I'll go to particularly maybe Lottie from a global point of view. Are we catching up? And is there still a fairly big delta between Australia and, I guess, you know, particularly US and UK?
I think it's fair to say we're rapidly improving and changing, and, you know, that e-commerce and online dynamic is definitely growing, but unfortunately that's happening everywhere. So it's not a matter of catching up, because other markets are sort of taking another step forward themselves. I mean, if you look at the UK is actually even further ahead than the US in terms of e-commerce penetration. And yeah, I guess the infrastructure is now there, and I think that's the important thing. And part of the reason why it's not going to go back is because of that investment. So whether it's marketplaces investing in fulfillment centers or, you know, new services on grocers, those things aren't going to go backwards. That's an investment in infrastructure and service that is there for the future, and I think that's why it's going to stick. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good place to look if you're looking for inspiration and innovation. Look at the US, look at the UK, see what the different players are doing there, because that often is, you know, a place where you're going to see what might be here in, you know, 2, 3, 5 years. The other really interesting space for us as part of our global network is looking at China as well. So the live shopping and live streaming aspect of that is something that I'm sure is going to take off a little bit more here. We've got TikTok coming in with, you know, those type of products in terms of live stream shopping and, you know, using influencers as they do in China. So I think the platforms are coming, the options are coming. I guess the consumer adoption, you know, is likely to follow as some of these platforms really take off.
Cool. We're nearly out of time, but maybe quickly from Lottie and Dean, just any market differences. Lottie?
Yeah, I think we get compared a ton to the US and the UK because in many ways we're not so different, but we also do have the Aussieisms that make us Australia. We do love to support a local business, and we like to feel ownership and feel like something is ours. And, you know, Dean talked a bit about, you know, shopping local. That's something that we've heard a ton of in the past year during COVID times. But I think it's exciting because it also presents a real opportunity for challenger brands and new e-commerce brands. And you know, we've heard about how the purchase journey is so long, and you know, there's all these omnichannel retailers, and I think some of the challenger brands that we've seen win and who will win are those ones that can kind of really understand what that consumer journey looks like and intercept at different points and kind of cut it down, which is what we've talked about a little bit. So I think there's some really exciting things about our market that make us unique, that present opportunity for some of those smaller retailers.
Fantastic. Dean?
Yeah, I think back to Roger's point, you know, the US and the UK were ahead of us before the pandemic, and they're definitely ahead of us after the pandemic. But what happened here is we were forced to change, where the US and the UK had already started to change. They saw those trends early. Retailers had adapted to this kind of e-commerce or omni-channel experience, mostly because consumers in those markets were willing to change. But you know, like Lottie said, Australians are Australian, and they're creatures of habit, and it's really hard to break that habit here in Australia. We're a smaller community, we love local. But now that we've been forced to change, I think retailers are the ones that have to play catch up. We weren't necessarily innovating in the e-commerce space broadly. We weren't necessarily thinking about this linear shopping experience. We weren't necessarily thinking about omni-channel. So, you know, the last year we've been forced to do that at a pace that no one ever expected. And now we're finally at a point that I think most retailers are comfortable with the strategy they had over the past year. And it's now about evolving that strategy so we don't end up in the same place again. So that's probably the difference. I think the US and the UK were definitely ready for something like this to force mass consumer change, and Australian retailers weren't as ready. But now we're there, and I think we're going to start to see, you know, Australia play catch up a lot quicker than we have in the past.
And we'll see some big winners, those who do embrace it too.
Absolutely.
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
I know we're out of time. We've got a question from Simon Burrows, which we're not going to get to, but it's my favorite type of question. So Simon, we actually might do a follow-up sort of Q&A article on this. So what kind of measurement analytics are your brand partners requesting? So we will take that on notice and get back to you, because I think that's something worth developing in a bit more thought, though we can give it in 30 seconds. Thank you to all our speakers today. That was really fun and really great information. So I'm sure we'll be back with more information there. Next week, not next week, next fortnight, in 2 weeks' time, our next webinar is on gaming. So we heard a little bit about the in-stream idea of shopping there. So following on from that, a lot of in-stream, a lot of mobile gaming, a lot of brands really jumping into this space. So, and we will have some new Australian data in terms of gamers presented at that webinar as well. So hopefully some of you can join it there. The link's been shared if you want to register. Thank you, Lottie, Mark, Roger and Dean. That was great fun. Hope you enjoyed it too. We'll be back soon, everyone. Thank you for joining.